Today on Spotlight Now, we spotlight Hawaii Island. We'll first catch up with the chief of police to get an idea on how crime and safety is going over there on the Big Island.
Plus, we'll be talking to John DeFries, who is the new head of the Mauna Kea Stewardship Oversight Authority. And we'll catch up with Kuhio Lewis from CNHA. They're about to kick off their conference on Hawaii Island. Spotlight Now starts now.
You're watching Spotlight Now with Ryan Kalei-Suji and Yunji Denise on Hawaii News Now. Have questions or comments for our guests? Join the conversation in our Facebook live stream. Spotlight Now, where Hawaii comes to talk.
Hello and thanks for tuning in here to Spotlight Now on a busy Tuesday. We have a bunch of different guests that we want to get to. Of course, the topic, as we mentioned, will be focusing in on Hawaii Island. As always, we want to encourage those of you watching both on air and online to engage in the conversations. If you have any questions or comments for our guests, please feel free to head over to the Facebook section of our page at Hawaii News Now and enter your comments into the comments section on Facebook or by scanning this QR code you see at the bottom of your screen.
And we want to welcome in our first guest, who is the Chief of Police for Hawaii Island, and that is Ben Moszkowicz. Thank you so much for being here today, Chief.
Thanks for the opportunity. It's always a great time to talk story.
So we know your background, having been on the force here at HPD in Honolulu for many, many years, and then making the transition now to Chief, almost 2 years on the job on Hawaii Island. What are your reflections thus far?
It's another HPD. Move from one H to the other H. That's a little. There's a little rivalry amongst police officers. So, it's been a great transition. It's been a great move. It's everyone on the Big Island has been so welcoming. I encountered absolutely no resistance when I got there, which is great. Everybody seems to want to work together. We identified some issues real early on, and I've had a lot of collaborative partnerships with people in the department, in the county, and in the community to kind of get the ball rolling and help improve the department and the community as well.
Well, let's talk about some of those changes and some of the things that you've wanted to implement. You've been on the job now for 2 years. What was some of the focus and your primary focal points as you took over this job and the leadership of this department? What areas were you focusing in on?
Probably the biggest one is in terms of staffing. So we have 484 positions when I started. We actually have 496 now. So it's kind of a moving target. We're trying to add some positions to reorganize. But we had just over 400 officers. So we're about 75 to 80 positions short. So one of the things we did was we collaborated with the Department of Human Resources and with the mayor's office in the county, and we changed the way that we recruit. We changed the way that we take people who are interested in working for the police department and get them through their background check, get them through the civil service and their agility tests, and get them actually started and working. And we kind of flipped the switch on that Mother's Day of last year. So I know that seems like a long time ago, but in terms of police entering into the police career field, once you apply and you go through a process, and there's a series of months, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 months, until you actually start. Then there's another year of training, right? So we have these folks in the classroom for 6 months. They're out on field training for another 3 or 4 months after that. So it's almost a year and a half from the time we actually flip this switch to now when we're starting to see the results. And it's really exciting to see the results because we have 3 classes of recruits in various stages of training. I have a class of 15 new police officers that are going to go take their first assignment on next week. And then I have 14 after them and 16 after them and 20 more waiting to start in the middle of November. So when you add up just the people we have currently working for us in that recruit role, those 3 classes of people, that's more than 10% of my entire department has started within the last year, which is really exciting. If we can continue this, we are looking towards our goal is to, in November, we'll have more police officers than we've ever had on Hawaii Island once we tap 450. And then the goal is by this time next year to be 100% fully staffed and take a look at if there's a need to grow the department in terms of more patrol officers in rural areas. And that helps us to impact things like response times and community satisfaction and solving crimes. So it's really been exciting, and that's kind of one of the big things that my team has focused on is renovating that process, and we're starting to see real results that are tangible. And like I said, next week, I'm going to add plus 15 to the number of patrol officers that are out there, and 3 months after that, another 15.
You know, the county only has so much money, but it does have such a vast amount of land. When you think about adding patrol officers, I have to imagine that as, the leader of this department, you would love nothing more than to have more boots on the ground. How many officers do you think you need to fully patrol such a large landmass. I think people who, Ryan and I are both from the Big Island, but for people who haven't spent a lot of time there, it's hard to really emphasize just how much space you have to cover.
We have 4,028 square miles. So you could put every other Hawaiian island in our perimeter and room for a second Oahu. I have patrol districts that are larger than the island of Oahu, where I have 6 or 7 people working at a time. So the fact that the geography is what it is and that people live along the perimeter of that giant landmass creates some challenges for us. So one of the things we did in the last year was we asked the county auditor to take a look at our response times and to help us to analyze that data. And what we found is really unacceptable. I mean, we found that on average, it takes us between 16 and 18 minutes to get to a priority 1 call island-wide. And that's average, right? So if you're across the street from the police station and you call 911, that response is 1 second, right? So in some of these more rural areas out in Puna and in Hawaiian Ocean View, those times are much, much longer. And it's because we don't have the resources to staff all of that. So as we move forward and as we start to get full and we get to 496, in my mind, the right answer is probably somewhere closer to 550 or 575, but we have a really good benchmark in terms of response times now. And as we fill, we'll get another benchmark in response times. And if we can make an impact by adding staffing, then hopefully to me, it's about data, right? And what the data and then the analysis shows. If we can make an impact in response times and people start to feel more comfortable calling the police and more comfortable that we're going to be there in a timely manner to help them, and that convinces the county council to give us more positions to add more officers, that's where I think we should be.
One of the issues that we know that is facing the county is some of the illegal drug use. We saw just some of the numbers in the past with fentanyl use, a large number of cases actually coming from Hawaii Island, and the crackdown that has to happen on that in the area around the Big Island. What can you tell us about some of the things that you're hoping that the department can do to crack down some of the drug usage and overall what you've noticed in trends and things that you're seeing there on Hawaii Island?
So in terms of vacancies, we have a lot of vacancies. A lot of our 50 or 60 or so vacancies are in our vice divisions. So one of the things that this group of 15 people that are coming out for their first assignment are going to do is push other incumbent patrol officers into veteran officers into these vice assignments. So part of it is increasing staffing, which allows them to have more of a focused deterrent effect. Part of it is focusing on the main ways that drugs come into our island on Hawaii Island. Hilo Airport, not so much. The only place you can get from Hilo is Honolulu at the moment. But the Kona Airport, there's nonstops to the West Coast, and it's set up as an international airport. So we do see a lot of illegal narcotics flowing through the airports and then through parcels. So the way we combat those from an enforcement standpoint is we look for partnerships, right? We have officers who are task force officers with the Postal Service. We have officers who are task force officers with Homeland Security and with the FBI on the island. So we can use those federal resources to help us to focus not necessarily on people who are maybe addicted to drugs, but on the people who are preying on them by selling them the drugs. So for us, it's that, and it's a partnership with even the state. So the Kona Airport underwent this really incredible renovation. If you haven't been there in a while, it's not quite done, but it's looking quite fantastic. And the police department kind of got kicked out during the renovation. So working with Director Sniffen at DOT to kind of get us and our vice people back into the airport footprint to provide security at the airport, but then also to give us a base of operations to focus specifically on deterring that importation of drugs that's kind of the main idea of where we're trying to take things.
You mentioned response times to Puna in particular, and my understanding, and I don't know if the statistic still holds true, but that it is, if not the most, one of the fastest growing counties in terms of population and influx, people moving to that area. At the same time, it is quite vast, and there is a feeling, you see headline after headline, that there is a little bit of a wild, wild west. I don't know, energy down there. So what do you think you can do to shore up some of the enforcement there? Because it does feel like, people are kind of doing whatever they want down there.
Yep, and some of that comes because the response time has been so long historically that people stop calling. And that's really it's very disheartening as a chief to think that, if you had a problem and you needed help, that you wouldn't call because you have a belief that we're not going to come. That's unacceptable to me. So part of what we're doing is we're upping the patrol staff by focusing these new people that are coming out. Very few of them are going to Hilo and Kona. Most of them are going to the Ka'u region, which has Hawaii Ocean View, and the Puna region. And we also added a patrol lieutenant to kind of increase the staffing and oversight. The problem there also is logistics, right? So the district is kind of shaped like an L. Because of lava flows from the volcano, you can't get from one end to the other without traveling 50, 60 miles. And so when there's a day where there are 6 or 7 or 8 officers working in that district the size of Oahu, and something big kicks off on one side of that out in Keao, it's hard to then get backtracked to Pauoa all the way out to, wherever else by the Volcano National Park that you might need to get, right? So it's a distance thing the distance is hard. The infrastructure, the roads, the fact that they don't connect in the way that we would like them to connect makes it harder. And then just the sheer size means that with the staffing we have, it becomes, like you said, almost impossible to be everywhere at once, let alone where we need to be.
One of the tools that we're seeing more and more law enforcement and agencies throughout the country enforce and start utilizing is body cameras. And there were some changes and some policies and things that you implemented during your time here over in the leadership of Hawaii County. Can you tell us a little bit about what happened with some of the changes that you made and how things are going with the usage of body cam?
Sure. Body cam is an amazing tool. It gives people who are not at the scene an opportunity to experience at least some of what the officers there experience. We can release body cam on an officer-involved shooting or a critical incident, within 2 or 3 days to help increase transparency. So it's an amazing tool. It's absolutely essential. And the body cam policy that the department had when I got there was sufficient. It wasn't all the things that we wanted it to be. So what we did is, this is very, off the wall thinking for Hawaii County, but we actually convened a working group where we called in members of the bargaining unit, people from patrol, people from investigative divisions, people from administration, and said, okay, we're going to go through this policy line by line. We're going to tear it apart, and we're going to see what's not working. We wanted the policy to reflect what the officers are doing in the field, but we also want the policy to reflect the direction that we want the administration and the concept of this huge transparency tool to go. So it's exciting to see that kind of a large policy that's integrated in a bunch of other policies kind of move through the change process to now where that policy revision is done and it's being used, and people are experiencing results. We have technology coming along that one of the problems with body cams is that an officer forgets to or fails to push the button to start the camera. Even if it's on, it's not going to capture a recording. So one of the exciting tools that we have coming is a new conducted energy weapon, a new taser. And the taser works in such a way that when the taser is activated, it uses Bluetooth technology to send out a signal, and any body cam that's within the Bluetooth envelope is automatically told to turn on. So even if the officers arrive and it's a very dynamic situation and they forget to hit the button because of all the things that they're trying to consider, if and when somebody activates and turns on their taser, then it's kind of taken care of for them in the background. So technology plus policy revision plus practice gets us to this place where we have this really great source of information that hopefully helps to dispel the myths sometimes of what happens at some of these critical incidents, and also gives us a tool that we can share with the public.
Wow, that is exciting. When is that going to be implemented?
The Taser 10?
Yeah.
So we're currently in policy negotiations with the bargaining unit, with SHOPO, so by the end of the year. We've started some training, we've had them come down, we bought all the equipment. We're right on the edge of that, kicking off the actual implementation of the devices in the field.
I want to ask you about something that made headlines today, and that is the situation with the morgues on both sides of the island. You have Kona Community Hospital along with Hilo Medical Center in the past serving as a morgue basically for the county, and now saying that they don't want to do that anymore. You made a significant expenditure basically to have your own morgue on the go until you can build a permanent facility. Tell us about the amount of money you're spending and also the deadline that you're facing, because Hilo Medical Center says they want those bodies out by the end of the month.
Right. So the neighbor islands are a little bit different than Oahu in that the police chief, by manner of being the police chief, according to the Hawaii Revised Statutes, is also the coroner. So that becomes the police department's problem on how to deal with remains, especially when they're involved in some sort of crime, or there's evidentiary value, things like that, or we need to do autopsies. So we spent some money at the end of the last fiscal year, and we bought 2 large 40-foot refrigerated containers that are going to serve as our temporary storage facility. And luckily, Hilo Medical Center has been gracious enough, and Kona Medical Center also are allowing us to continue the use of their autopsy suites. So yes, we're the coroner, but no, we don't do autopsies. We contract those out to people with some forensic training. So we'll still be allowed to have our vendors use the autopsy suites and the technology at the hospital to can do those kind of autopsies and investigations. But the storage at the hospitals is coming to an end. Kona, I think we're already in our container that we have there, and in Hilo, we're trying to work out some logistics to get these containers kind of implemented and planted in the right way and secured and fenced and lighting and security concerns, things like that. So we're hopeful that the medical center remains patient with us as we get really close, hopefully soon, to developing this kind of short-term storage solution. And then a little bit over the horizon in the next 4 to 5 years, what we'd like to do with the county council's help is to identify some land and hire an architect and work with consultants to develop a morgue, like an actual fully functioning morgue facility that'll have storage, but at the same time we'll have autopsy suites. And what that does for the island is it gives us redundancy. If there is some sort of natural disaster or, God forbid, even a small commuter plane crash at either of the islands, we're automatically over the storage capacity at either of our centers now. So more capacity and more redundant facilities, especially on the Big Island, is a really great idea.
And what do you think the timeline for that looks like? Because this sounds like this has to happen fairly quickly.
Yeah, so I know the mayor's office and the governor's office and corporation council are working together now on what type of either support through negotiation with the medical center what type of emergency proclamation might help us to cut down on the construction time. So I know those conversations are taking place every day. I've got text messages all morning, even though I'm here on Oahu, about those. So I know that's ongoing. I've seen timelines that stretch out to the end of the year in terms of construction. Worst comes to absolute worst. We do own the containers. If we could find some sort of generator power, the police are really good at reacting in emergencies and taking the pieces we have and triaging and making solutions that work really great for a short period of time. So if I have to take those containers and drop them on the footprint at the Hilo police station and find some sort of generator power, that's what we'll do. But we're hoping the medical center continues to work with us as we kind of transition into this temporary storage solution.
Hard to believe we're almost out of time. I do want to ask you, though, making that transition from one H to the other H, what do you think is the biggest challenge facing Hawaii Island and how it's different from the police work that you had to do here?
Without refusing to answer your question, I want to change it a little bit. I think, having a lot of experience here in the Honolulu Police Department and now taking a look at the Hawaii Police Department as the chief, there are a lot of things that when I was in Honolulu, I had misconceptions about what's happening on the neighbor islands. And there's a lot of things that the people in the Hawaii Police Department do really great. Honolulu is a big department. So the way it's structured, when an officer shows up to handle a burglary report or someone gets their car broken into, they basically take down all the facts, they package that up, and they send it off. And that's the end. That's the last time they see the case, unless there's some sort of request for a follow-up or if the case goes to trial. On Hawaii Island, that's way different. We don't have the resources upstream to handle that influx of cases. So officers, as a result, they're going to handle that initial investigation, and then they're going to find out that your credit card was used at Walmart. And then they're going to go to Walmart and they're going to get the security footage. And then they're going to put out a be on the lookout bulletin for this guy. And when someone else in the department recognizes them, because the Big Island is the hugest small town in the world, they're going to be the ones who write the warrants. And they're going to be the ones who go out to help make the arrest. And if there's evidence at the scene that needs warrants. And so we have police officers who are doing basically the broad spectrum of police work. We don't have the volume that Oahu has, right, in Honolulu, but we certainly have a lot of utility infielders, if you'll pardon my baseball analogy. We have people who can do a lot of different positions, play at a lot of different positions, and they do it really well.
Chief, we appreciate you being here. We want to invite you back another time. Until then, we're going to take a break right now. John DeFries joins us after this break. Stay with us. You're watching Spotlight Now.
Hello and welcome back to Spotlight Now. We're continuing on in our conversation, focusing in on Hawaii Island and some of the issues and hot topics that are going on there on Hawaii Island. Joining us now is a familiar face. Joining us is John DeFries, who's the Executive Director of the Mauna Kea Stewardship Oversight Authority. Great to see you, John. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. Congratulations.
Thank you. It's been a while since we talked to you. You obviously in this new role. First of all, for those who aren't familiar, talk to us about what the Mauna Kea Stewardship Oversight Authority is exactly.
Sure. So let's go back to 2019 July when the demonstration takes place, and we see an incredible movement of people very passionate at that time. That led to COVID the following year. In the summer of 21, a working group was convened to come up with recommendations on how to move forward. And so the authority was really born inside the working group's report, which was submitted to the legislature in 22 and became law in July 7, 2023.
Okay, so you will take up, this authority takes over the stewardship from the University of Hawaii. Now you get to make the decisions about what happens on the mountain.
Eventually, a 5-year clock started in July of 2023, so we have until July 2028 to complete the transition from the University of Hawaii to the new authority.
You know, given the origins of this authority, that it is born out of a lot of people who were frustrated, who felt like their voices hadn't been heard. How are you engaging community as you start to, take over that stewardship?
Great question. I think it starts by who gets appointed to the board. For the first time, we have people on the board who, frankly, were the leaders of the demonstration back in July 2019 and 2015. Lanakila Manguil, Antinoinoi Wang Wilson, to name a couple of them, are now inside the boardroom, along with representatives from astronomy, education, lineal descendants. I will tell you, of the 12 board members, 8 of them have Native Hawaiian ancestry.
So how would you describe, when you talk about some of those individuals there, there's obviously a dynamic that's involved because of the history of this project with TMT and just the passion that was brought out during this time. How are you navigating through the various voices and really trying to help to steward this land moving forward?
So credit for that actually goes back to the board chair, John Komeiji, who has been there from day one. He has been intent on fostering a level of trust and communication and mutual respect. Going forward, the tougher issues are going to be coming into that boardroom, and then we'll begin to be tested as to how well we can function and remain unified inside a very diverse environment.
What is the place, do you think, for astronomy on Hawaii Island, given the conflicts that we've seen in the past? But we also know that there are many people in the community who really support this industry, who think that it's a great benefit, not only financially, but also just to humanity. So how do you balance those two things?
Take TMT out of the equation for a second, okay? Without TMT, today, on that mountain is the pinnacle of astronomical research in the world, okay? Everybody in the world knows that. And so, from a Native Hawaiian perspective, and frankly from my own family perspective, there's value in it because we trace our origins as a people back to the cosmos. Effectively, modern astronomy for me is tantamount to doing the genealogy of Wakea, Sky Father. I realize that's not a common appreciation or common understanding, but it's important that no matter where you stand on the subject of modern astronomy in Mauna Kea, claim it, own it, be willing to teach others about it. And most importantly, we've got to be able to commit to expanding our capacity to be empathetic so that we understand other perspectives that may differ from our own.
Bringing TMT back into this conversation, one of the things that we heard time and time again during this time in 2019 was a constant theme from the Hawaiian community that their voice, their opinions were not heard during this process, which dates back, a decade before we even got to that point in 2019. How are you ensuring that the community voice is now being heard? Are there going to be plans to engage the community more in dialogue, discussions, town halls. What does that community engagement look
Sure.
like?
We are required as a new authority to come up with a new master plan, a new management plan, and a new financial plan. In order to get there, right, we need to bring the right team of consultants to work with our staff, but more importantly, we've got to go island to island, community to community, face to face, and listen to ensure that we don't replicate the shortfall of past experiences.
And for folks who haven't been keeping up, what is the status of TMT? Where is that project at the moment? And do you think that eventually that project will come to pass?
You know, from the authority standpoint, TMT, the University of Hawaii, the parties that are involved in that have not formally come to the authority as yet. We're looking forward to that day when it does happen. I do know just from a community perspective that they're in the community, engaging with different communities, different organizations. To their credit, they're talking directly to some of the kia'i to understand what it is that is central to their objection to TMT. But I'll leave it there because, and I would encourage TMT to make the time to come onto your program as well, because I think the timing would be right, and curiosity, the first thing they hear, Mauna Kea Authority, the next question is TMT, and there's so much more that we're needing to focus on before we even get to TMT.
Well, a large player, of course, as we mentioned earlier, has been the University of Hawaii, and just how they've managed and oversaw, a lot of what's happening on the mountain now. What do you think that future of the University of Hawaii's role looks like on the mountain, knowing that astronomy continues to play a huge role in the University of Hawaii Hilo and that program? What does that relationship you think look like in the future?
You know, currently, or up until the time the authority was formed, UH had many hats. One of them was the master lessee that subleased land. They held permits. There's a number of management functions they did before you even get to the Institute for Astronomy, okay? Going forward, it's my hope, and I know it's shared by many in the community, that the Institute for Astronomy continues to flourish and be heralded as a world leader globally, okay? What's not going to be part of the University of Hawaii, however, going forward, is the management and stewardship of the mountain.
You know, you mentioned that you feel a personal connection to astronomy, and I'm curious how that played into your decision to take this job in the first place. This is not a role for the faint of heart. I think you put yourself right in the center of a lot of controversy. So why did you want to take this on?
Number one, I have immense respect for all the mountains on the island, starting with Mauna Kea. Number two, at this stage in my life, I wanted to be accountable to the mountain. And I report directly to a 12-member board, who in turn is part of the governor's, under the governor's umbrella. Above that, if I could visualize an organizational chart, would be Mauna Kea, that ultimately we are all accountable to the Mauna, right? We're in a defining moment relative to Mauna Kea. I believe I could help. I have an appreciation for everything the Kia'i is doing, not only what they've done. And I have a lot of heart and compassion for them. I also have a tremendous amount of respect for modern astronomy. Okay, our ability to bring that together is yet to be tested, but it's the pioneering aspect of this assignment and the complexity of it that has attracted me.
Through this entire process and engagement of, speaking with those who are, have gotten involved, I guess, in the process of Mauna Kea and everything that we saw back in 2019, the conversation over the existing infrastructure, the existing telescopes came up time and time again. And since then, we've seen the decommissioning of several of these telescopes. What can you tell us about that process right now, and what remains and what's being taken down?
As we sit here today, 2 decommissionings and deconstruction demolitions have been completed. Hokukea, which is the University of Hawaii's educational telescope, and one called the Caltech Submillimeter Observatory. If you were on the summit today, you would see that those lands have been completely restored. Relative to the Caltech telescope, final reports are due from the consultants that will enable the University of Hawaii to bring that to closure. UH's Hokukea, they are removing conduits off-site, but fundamentally the land has been restored to the standards that they agreed to in the decommissioning agreement.
I'm curious, we mentioned that you're sort of stepping into controversy. The authority itself is not without controversy. Its very existence has been challenged by OHA. I know that they've submitted a lawsuit. I would imagine that you can't comment directly on the lawsuit, but if you can, please do. And if not, sort of speak to the larger issue, if you could, about the distrust of an agency like this and what you tell folks that you encounter, because I'm sure, you've lived on that island for a long time and you're from there, and so you must meet people who don't love what they're seeing.
The lawsuit that OHA filed was filed before I got there. I have a tremendous respect for a number of people at OHA. OHA should continue to do what it thinks is best for the beneficiaries. I will say this, that when I do read the lawsuit, at the heart of it is a fear and a concern that their claims against the University of Hawaii for past actions or inactions is being somehow absolved by the creation of this new authority. There is no legal basis for that, and that's frankly not the case. With 8 Native Hawaiians on the board, 3 of the 4 staff people, including myself, are Native Hawaiians. Therefore, we are beneficiaries to OHA. I would encourage OHA to revisit this lawsuit, find the heart to stop it, and come work with us. We need your support and guidance, not the distraction of a lawsuit.
Have they been, I guess, involved? And what has OHA's relationship been like in the past with the stewardship of Mauna Kea?
The working group I talked about earlier that was formed that led to the birth of the authority, OHA was in that working group, okay? Where the wires got crossed and the legalities kicked in, I don't know. But I'm encouraged not only by the makeup of the board, but we now have one of my favorite high chiefesses there as the CEO in Stacy Ferreira. And I'm hoping that Stacy and I can at least begin to unpack some of this and find a way forward. That's my hope.
With Mauna Kea, we're talking not only about astronomy, but also commercial activity that happens on the mountain, and also cultural practitioners who need to have access. What do you think that balance is there? What is your thought about tour groups that go up on the mountain and things like that?
We're doing a preliminary assessment, but let me say, going back to the mandate for a new master plan and a new management plan, capacity is going to be analyzed and evaluated, and we're going to end up determining the answer to that question as part of that process. Let me also say something, that the current Center for Mauna Kea Stewardship, University of Hawaii, in my opinion, separate and apart from the public process that may or may not have happened, the people at the Center for Mauna Kea Stewardship are top flight. And we're hoping, in fact, we're mandated by the law to transfer roughly about 50 to 55 of those people there. That's a harsh environment to work in. That's a tough environment. There is a passion that those people have, in addition to a professionalism that we're hoping to protect and make part of the authority going forward.
Is there a model that exists that you think could be the way forward for any future development, be it TMT or maybe something not of that scale or size, or any other astronomy program? Because when you look at things like Imiloa, and just from an outsider's perspective and someone who lives in Hilo, you see the involvement that they have in the community. They're running a number of programs. They have, they're very much in the community. But I guess my question is that the model of what a partnership or a future could look like for these types of astronomy programs and telescopes that would like to exist on the Mauna?
The short answer is yes. Imiloa is being observed worldwide as a model, right? that has a strong cultural base and a strong orientation within that culture to science. And so going forward, in our efforts with the University of Hawaii, think of it double hull canoe. IFA, Institute for Astronomy, one hull. Imiloa, second hull. And the authority is the deck.
I like the analogy. You know, when you encounter folks, and there are some people who feel that there should be no commercial activity, there should be no telescopes on the mountain, what is your response to them? How do, you know, what is the balance there?
You know, I take that seriously. There is a realm called Mauna Kea, Mauna Kea, I'm sorry. And that is a space above the Mauka edge of the forest line, that no humans belong there, okay? And in the days of old, only the kahuna who were well-trained were able to proceed there. And so I respect that argument. I take it seriously. I'm contemplating. There isn't a day that goes by I don't think about Mauna Kea. When I immerse myself in that perspective, what I'm also holding myself accountable to is, in that paradigm, I don't belong above the forest line, okay? The same can be said in jet travel. I don't belong in a jet, one that's leaving carbon emissions in Mauna Kea, okay? So at some point, I'm going to have to reconcile the issue as to whether I fly again, right? If that's where I'm at, okay? So it's not easy. These are very personal feelings. And feelings that differ from mine, I have utmost respect for, okay? And I'm asking the same in return. And so when I talk about being accountable to the mountain, I'm talking about the fact that I've got to find a way personally to reconcile it. I've been there for 5 months. I have not gone to the summit by intention, because spiritually, I'm not ready. So part of the own family training is to spiritually elevate your capacity and your vibration to the point that you are prepared to go. And I know myself well enough to know that in the last 5 months, I've been living in my head and my intellect, and that's not adequate.
I mean, given the kind of deference that you are describing, you know, that's a very powerful and, as you said, a very personal take. I wonder, you know, if you think it's appropriate for tourists or what have you to be going up there, given what you've just laid out.
Not without training, not without preparing, right? The future of Mauna Kea is, this is not just for sightseeing. I feel the same way about Waipio Valley, frankly, right? These places that are Vahipana, that are sacred to Native Hawaiians, are not places that you just drive by and as an attraction. I mean, your purpose needs to be clear, and you need to be prepared to take that step. So that's part of an exciting future, frankly.
I want to circle back when you talked about some of those 2 telescopes that have been decommissioned, and what was the you said restored back to what was acceptable. Did you see any damages? Was there anything left behind? What is the footprint look like now where those telescopes once inhabited?
So I personally have not been there, but a member of my senior staff, Bill Stormont, has been there. If you drove up there today, you wouldn't, and didn't know where that was located, you wouldn't know. It is, the soils have been returned, the substrate, the foundations have been removed. It's a very delicate process, and especially the Caltech telescope, right, which is larger. They went to great lengths to develop the right protocols, the right monitors, to make sure that that was handled correctly. And people on the staff of the Center for Mauna Kea Stewardship who know the mountain well have personally been involved in how that surface soils were restored.
We talked about why people maybe shouldn't go to the mountain. I'm interested also on the flip side of that. If you think about what Ryan was laying out about how integrated the astronomy community is in a lot of these areas, in Hilo, in Waimea. What do you say, as the economic benefit, the sort of benefit to mankind? Why should astronomy be part of the fabric of Hawaii Island?
It's I have this sense, just a sense, that if the mountain didn't want astronomy, this may sound really esoteric, but it's how I feel. The mountain would behave differently. There are elements to the way the wind blows, to the contours of the slope, that make it ideal for astronomy, okay? Now, Hawaiians of old would have treated astronomy as a sacred science, okay? Because they would have known they're in the realm of the gods, okay? The challenge for us is, can we elevate astronomy going forward that has a respect for that sanctity? And that is an unanswered question as I sit here today, but it is top of the mind in why I'm there.
Our last question as we move on here in our conversation about things that are pertaining to Hawaii Island. For you, what do you hope for the Mauna, for this authority, for the people, for the Kia'i? Like, what would your ultimate goal or win be in this world?
The ultimate goal is for the authority to develop a fair, transparent, consistent process, okay? And a space where people feel safe to share their manao, okay? Right now, I've talked to a number of people who do not want to come forward because they do not feel safe, right? And that's unfortunate. I do think that the authority has the capability of providing that kind of a process and a place where your personal viewpoints will be safe when you share that. We've got a long way to go. We're going to be tested week in and week out as we move forward. But if I didn't think we could do it, I wouldn't be here.
Well, we thank you for being here today. 5 months on the job, and we're going to invite you back soon. It was so great to talk with you. Thank you so much, John. We appreciate
Look forward to it. Thank you.
Aloha.
Kuhio Lewis is on the other side of this break. Stay with us.
What is Hawaii's soul?
It's the way we exist with all living things. The aina, the ocean, the sky, the kanaka, who originated from the islands.
And everyone who calls Hawaii home.
It's all of us living with island consciousness.
It's understanding that the past is in front of us so that everyone can follow the kupuna
that came before us.
It's our shared kuleana to take care of these islands.
And each other, because we belong to Hawaii.
We are Ko Hawaii.
Spotlight Now with Yunji Denise and Ryan Kalesuji. Connecting you with newsmakers from throughout our islands. Going in depth with Hawaii's leaders and taking your questions live. Spotlight Now, where Hawaii comes to talk.
Well, we're continuing on in our conversation, highlighting things that are going on Hawaii Island and happening on Hawaii Island. Speaking of things that are happening, we have an exciting conference that is happening next week. Joining us now is Kuhio Lewis, the CEO of the Council for Native Hawaiian Advancement. Thank you so much for joining us, Kuhio, and being part of the conversation.
Thanks for the invitation.
We want to begin with this conference that's happening. You've had it in different locations. Last year was in Las Vegas, now on Hawaii Island. What can people expect, and what can we expect? What are you hoping to come about from this conversation next week?
Well, I think it's just exciting to change things up and not do the same thing every year. So I also think that Oahu has benefited tremendously from the resources that this convention brings, and I think it's time for us to spread our wings and provide some support to our neighbor islands as well.
You know, I looked over the conference schedule, and there's a lot of programming that is very specific to Hawaii Island. I know there are going to be some tours as well, and connecting with businesses and also cultural practitioners. Why Hawaii Island now?
That's a very good question. I've had a chance to assess what the future from my lens looks like. And honestly, if you think critically about it, Oahu is so entrenched in like politics and policies that have just over the years, I think, have really didn't position us as well. And I think Hawaii Island, we have an opportunity to create a better trajectory. And so my thought with regard to Hawaii Island is that we can help shape the future. We just acquired 43 acres of land on Hawaii Island. We're working closely with a lot of stakeholders. So we plan to move a lot of our resources and start to build up the correct way on Hawaii Island.
Beyond just what's happening on Hawaii Island, there's so much that you folks are doing throughout the state, and we know that CNHA has been very involved in what's happening over on Maui. Can you give us an update about some of the things and the progress you're making with helping some of those displaced victims of the wildfires?
Yeah, Maui is going to be a long-term thing. It's not short-term at all. We are remaining agile to be able to support Maui as things evolve. We're housing over 900 survivors right now in our various housing programs. And it's not just housing them, it's providing them support along the way. Our ultimate goal is to get them into more permanent housing. They're in rental units, they're in short-term rentals. We got to get them a little longer stability till Lahaina starts to come back online. So our focus is on, right now, I think we're kind of like in a middle phase. The long-term phase is getting them back into Lahaina. But we're committed to the long haul. We have a lot of resources, a lot of assets on the ground there. But that's an important part of our fabric. We don't want any more people to move away from our islands.
Yeah, speaking of that, what is the diaspora, particularly on Maui, looking like right now? Have you been able to, we've heard about, numbers in the thousands in terms of people who left. Do we know the demographics? Do we know how many Native Hawaiian, and do we know where they went?
I think people would be surprised by the number we believe it to be. Obviously we have high touch with survivors. Because of the programs that we're administering, they apply for programs and support. That number is pretty big. I believe it to be in the thousands that have left. And these are not individuals, these are families. Some maybe temporarily until things situate, but there's others that have just moved away completely. So if you're asking for a number, we believe it to be close to 2,000 families have already left.
Of Native Hawaiian descent?
I wouldn't say they're Native Hawaiian. I would say there's a good portion of them Native Hawaiian. And we see them. We've seen the reports. We've seen the interviews. But I think it's probably in that range.
Going back to the conference that's happening, is there any one topic, theme, or focus that you're hoping, or conversations, I can also say, that you're hoping will come about or come out from this gathering next week?
There's something for everybody. First of all, at the convention, you have fashion shows, you have like all these Nahoku Hano award winners that are going to take stage. You have political discussions, you have policy discussions, you have culture and arts just surrounding the whole thing. It's an experience. It's not just a gathering, it's actually an experience. It's a chance to experience Hawaii Island and the richness of its history. For me, I'm excited about we kind of got distracted. We were moving in a tourism direction, and then Maui happened. So I want to focus back on how we're going to reform tourism. So there's some cool things happening around that. Like there's some huaka'i that you get to personalize and get to show people like what from a Native Hawaiian lens, what tourism could look like. The fashion show excites me. We're going to feature, Hawaii Island has some rich culture and arts there. So you get to see some of the big designers, and they've been paired up with a master chef. So you get to taste the design, not just see it. So exciting stuff all the way around.
You mentioned the acquisition of 43 acres. Can you tell us a little bit more about that land and what the plans are for it?
We're looking to build houses. We're going to have to be creative in how we do that, because obviously we want those houses to go to local people, but we don't want to violate laws. So we're looking strategically at how to build affordable housing for Hawaii people where it stays in their hands long term.
You mentioned tourism and that conversation that you're hoping to come about. And of course, Kilohana has also become part of CNHA and your efforts to really change the lens of tourism and the way in which we are marketing and promoting Hawaii and our culture. What can you tell us about what you've learned over the past year of Kilohana? What has been some of the challenges? What have you experienced through taking on the responsibility of sharing this narrative of Hawaii beyond our waters?
Well, I think everybody's learning. It's been a year since we signed the contract. Obviously there are things that we want to be doing, but the contract that we have with HCA doesn't allow for, so we're just doing it anyway with our own resources. But I think at the end of the day, it's just a coming together, being at the table to have discussions. I think is very important. So I think we're trying to figure out how we can blend community and the industry, and that's going to take time. Obviously, the tourism sector is the driving economy of our state, and you can't just like turn it upside down. And so you kind of got to do it delicately. For me, curating culture, curating experiences, building up our business capacity, where you drive through Waikiki and you see Hawaii businesses and not chain mainland restaurants and retailers, is part of how I want to measure our success. We still have a ways to get there. But nonetheless, I think having a seat at the table is important for us to get there.
Yeah, I'm curious if you could reflect just briefly on what you heard from John earlier. You know, you will be on Hawaii Island. Your Mauna Kea is right up the, you look out the window from where the conference is being held and you see the summit. What do you think about the balance that he's trying to strike in meeting the needs of the astronomy community and the Native Hawaiian community?
I think it's a beautiful thing. If you look at the spectrum, you have Native Hawaiian leadership stepping up to the plate, even in controversial spaces, like, arguably, CNHA is in tourism because John DeFries was the head of HCA at the time. So he's no stranger to take on tough, difficult conversations. I think with regard to his new role, it's an interesting one because there is traditional practices that need to be upheld and respected. And then there's the advancement of our community, of our people. Finding the bridge is something that John has been doing over his career, and I think he's the right person for the job. I don't think it's easy, but I think he'll find that balance.
Well, we're almost out of time, but beyond just the conference, it seems like there is always something going on with CNHA. What's next beyond the conference? Is there anything that you folks are planning? We know there's the hula show that's also been launched and happening, and it's actually moved, I believe, because of the construction going on at the shell. But what else is sort of on the horizons for the organization?
We're kind of like just this agency that vibes with the community, so I can't really tell you, but I can tell you that it'll be exciting. It'll be aligned to what our community needs. But that's how we roll. Is we kind of just leave it for the elements and the people to help drive us.
Well, we appreciate you being here. We wish you a great conference. Our Mahealani Richardson is going to be on Hawaii Island at the conference covering it for us, so we expect some great reports there. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
We'll be right back right after this.
Spotlight Now with Yunji Denise and Ryan Kalei-Suji. Connecting you with newsmakers from throughout our islands. Going in depth with Hawaii's leaders and taking your questions live. Spotlight Now, where Hawaii comes to talk.
Well, we had a very interesting conversation, a wide range of topics that we discussed, all focusing on Hawaii Island. Of course, we started off with our conversation with speaking with the chief of police there on Hawaii Island, someone who is new to the role, but quickly learning about how difficult it is to police on the Big Island just because of the sheer size of the island.
Yeah, and the size of his department. He's made great inroads, he says, to up the staffing there, but not nearly enough officers, and really trying to boost that. We also heard from John DeFries, and really interesting to hear his personal connection to Mauna Kea, his personal connections to the issues, his understanding of all sides of this. You heard Kuhio Lewis say there at the end that he's no stranger to controversy and he is the right person for this job.
And somebody who, of course, John DeFries leading the Hawaii Tourism Authority and now being placed in this position of having to really navigate these relationships that he existed and he had as a head of the tourism authority, as many see Mauna Kea as a tourist destination, but also taking in the lens of being a Native Hawaiian in this role and recognizing the significance of just what Mauna Kea means to the Hawaiian people. Shockingly, he's the head of this authority, but he said he has yet to visit the summit of Mauna Kea.
Yeah, and that's really in deference, he said, because he feels so spiritually connected to it, that he wants to make sure that he's in the right headspace and the right place to actually take that on. So that was a very interesting reveal there. Also exciting to hear about what's happening with CNHA, their conference on Hawaii Island next week. You heard about all the businesses, performers, cultural practitioners that they're going to be highlighting, but also tackling some deep, important issue. What does tourism look like in the long term? The issue of what happens on Maui and the acquisition of 43 acres and what happens there.
Yeah, and CNHA has become such a critical player in so much sectors of government, as well as with the Native Hawaiian voice. We, of course, have seen their response to Maui. We heard from Kuhia Lewis of just how much they continue to do to help the Maui community with those who have been displaced, and really trying to focus on finding adequate housing for these long-term, for those who continue to suffer. They also are actively involved. Of course, there's the hula show in Waikiki, and so there's always seemed that you heard him. We're going to just roll with it. There's a lot that CNHA is actively involved in, and we'll continue to keep our eye and ear to all that's happening with their organization.
Yeah, and as we mentioned, Mahea will be there next week covering the conference for all platforms of Hawaii News Now. Next week, a familiar face, but one we haven't talked to in a while, Governor Green will be back here in the hot seat.
Yeah, a lot to talk about with the governor. Of course, there are going to be some changes in the Hawaii State Legislature, specifically in the House with a new leadership. His thoughts about what that looks like moving forward.
Yeah, especially because he did campaign sign waving for Scott Saiki. So what happens now that that seat has been filled with someone else? So very interesting to see that. Coming up, of course, today, presidential debate, Kamala Harris and Donald Trump facing off in Philadelphia. You're getting a live look at it right there. The National Constitution Center. Very interesting discussion about to happen in just a few minutes.
Thanks for tuning into Spotlight Now. We'll see you next week.